Hello, this is Unsun with GameLeap, and in today's video, we're going to be covering the Season 14 tank items. These items have been out on the PvE for quite some time, and while they are not as strong as the on-hit items that we've already covered, they are definitely going to be the second strongest subset of items in the game. Tanks, especially against AP opponents, are going to be absolutely broken next season, so we're going to prepare you for both mid and top lane by explaining what these items do and when you should be building them. Just a quick reminder, if you want a head start in Season 14, head on over to GameLeap.com where we have courses to allow you to learn champions very quickly without having to invest much time into practice tool. You want to play Sion with the new broken MR itemization? Go to GameLeap, you have the best tips and tricks laid out for you immediately. Let's go ahead and get right into this video, starting off with our reworked mythic items. Iceborne Gauntlet has been nerfed substantially. While this item is quite cheap now, it did lose the percent damage reduction that we did have on the Spellblade application. The stats on this item have also been brought down a pretty substantial amount, making it not so attractive as a first item any longer. Instead, my prediction for this item as well as the other two converted mythics is that we'll first go one of the two Balmy Cinder items, followed immediately by Iceborne. We'll cover both these items in depth in just one moment. Our second converted mythic is going to be Heartsteel. The functionality of this item is essentially going to be the same as it is on live, it just does not have the mythic passive tied to it, strengthening our legendaries. This will be a decent first item situationally. If we're playing something like Tahm Kench into a physical damage dealer, then we can still safely buy this item. However, on traditional tanks, it's going to be highly beneficial to skip this item and just focus on your normal tank itemization. And last but not least of our converted mythics is going to be Jak'Sho the Protean. This item is interesting because the passives have been split into two separate items. Jak'Sho gives you the normal stacking armor and MR that it did before, but the AoE drain and heal has been instead shifted to Unending Despair, a brand new item. While Jak'Sho's two passives have been split, the amount of stats that Jak'Sho by itself gives you is ludicrous. This is going to be our new tank capstone item, so we essentially build one or two items for our lane phase, then we cap this off with a Jak'Sho. This is like building an Infinity Edge or a Death Cap on a more traditional carry. While this item is going to be flat out amazing for tanks, it's also going to be super impactful on bruisers or champions that have some sort of armor or MR steroid. I guarantee you in this item's current state, champions like Riven, who are already quite durable, are going to be abusing it. This item is just so dense as far as stats go that any sort of additional health that we will be getting will be made that more valuable. The easiest way to explain this is by looking at the value of effective HP. This is hyper nerdy. I recommend that you check out the LoL wiki if you want a concise write-up, but essentially the gist of it is that when we build resistances plus HP, our percentage of health that we lose every time we're hit is greatly reduced. A champion with 3000 health, 200 armor, and 200 MR will take the least amount of damage from the majority of other champions in the game without that value becoming redundant. There is a point where we could stack too much armor and magic resist, and Jak'Sho puts us right in that happy place where we want to be. The old capstone tank item was Gargoyle Stoneplate, but it was kind of hard to use and unintuitive for newer players, so it's been removed. Radiant Virtue has also been removed from the game as it is turning out to be quite the balanced nightmare long term. Alrighty, now that we covered the old stuff, let's go ahead and cover the new juicy stuff. The first item that I want to talk about is Hollow Radiance, and this item is just turbo overpowered. It will be nerfed immediately. This item has quite the unique stat line. Currently on the PvE, it gives you 600 health, 40 MR, and also some base health regen. These stats are okay by themselves, they're not great, but what really makes this item shine is the Immolate passive. This is a magic resist Sunfire Cape. Taking or dealing damage causes you to begin dealing magic damage per second to nearby enemies, increased by a percentage against minions for 3 seconds. Taking or dealing damage refreshes the duration of this effect. Desolate, our second passive, causes us to deal magic damage in an area of effect around enemies that we kill. This item is basically Sunfire Cape mixed with Tristana's E. It does not take a rocket scientist to tell you just how broken this is. Let's give you a scenario. You're playing a champion like Katarina who has poor wave clear and deals magic damage. The enemy mid laner locks in Sion, who already has decent wave clear by himself and is very potent when it comes to assisting his team. This Sion starts Doran's Shield plus Second Wind, making it impossible for us to actually shove him out of lane, and then he farms until Hollow Radiance. Now, from every moment that he touches a wave, he instantly kills it, and then he can immediately rotate to an objective or to your bot lane. This scenario doesn't just go for Katarina, but this is an extreme case. Essentially, every single mage in the game is going to struggle with the sheer amount of wave clear that this item is going to pump out, as well as the map pressure that comes with that. There is a lot of HP and a decent amount of MR on this item, which mages are going to struggle with the most by far. If you're a mage player, expect to see a lot of Sion, Cassante, and some bruisers mid lane rushing this item. It's going to be really bad to deal with at the very start of the season. As if this item was not apocalyptic enough when it came to shutting down magic damage, there is another contender that is just as strong in a different way. Hollow Radiance is a pseudo-offensive item with its Immolate passive, but our next item is going to be purely defensive to a point where I don't think that there's much that mages can do, and that's going to be Canik Rookern. Currently on the PvE, Canik Rookern grants you 400 health, 80 MR, and then also some base HP regen. These stats by themselves are okay for a starting item, but what really pushes this item over the edge is the passive that it grants you. Mage Bane, after not taking magic damage for 12 seconds, generate a 20% max health magic shield. 20% of your max health. Without calculating any of the magic resist that we gain from just building this item on top of itself, we're already 20% more durable against any form of magic damage. This is obscene, especially when it's on an item that already grants us a pretty decent chunk of health to begin with. This item's passive, being on such a low cooldown with such a disgustingly strong stat line, is going to completely shut out any form of early game bullying. Dorn's Shield and Second Wind are already disgusting against most mages, but it gets turned up to 11 the moment that we purchase this item. If we're playing some sort of scaling mage that is weak in skirmishes in the early game, and we're against a high pressure tank such as Sion, Cassante, and the like, who just stonewall us during the lane, we're not going to have any chance to impact the game. What I fear is going to end up happening for most mages is that they'll end up picking a mage, they'll get counterpicked by a tank with Demolish, that tank with Demolish is going to walk up and slap their turret on cooldown and then get Kainic Rookrun and make it even more oppressive. If you want free LP in the beginning of the season, I highly recommend that you look at Sion and you look at Cassante as mid lane flex picks. These champs are going to be so insanely strong when it comes to abusing this item, and both of them make great use of Demolish. Now that we've covered the really overpowered items, let's go ahead and discuss the new luxury item, which is going to be Unending Despair. This is an armor item that grants us 400 health, 55 armor, and also 10 ability haste. The stats are almost a direct parallel to Sunfire Cape, however the passive here is completely different. Anguish. While in champion combat, every 7 seconds deal magic damage to nearby enemy champions, healing for 250% of the damage dealt. This is the other half of the Jack Show passive that was split off, and it's meant to fill the role of Gargoyle Stoneplate and Redemption all at once. We want to dive in really deep, use our full rotation, and then eat a fat heal in the middle of our team fight. This item of course has a gross synergy with Jack Show just because the stat lines do augment each other so heavily, but you do predominantly want to build this item into fully physical damage teams as it is a solely armor item. Unlike Hollow Radiance or Kainic Rookrun, this item is not nearly as devastating to physical damage dealers. They can deal with this item quite easily as they do have better itemization against it, while also of course having physical damage spells and auto attacks. Great luxury item for later in the game when we have more items under our belt, but it's just that, a luxury item. Sunfire Aegis is still in the game, and this is going to be our most damage heavy tank item that's left over. It does essentially all the same things, the damage on it has just been slightly brought up. Still a really good item to build into physical damage dealing carries, but we will generally want to go Hollow Radiance because the sheer amount of burst damage we'll be able to put onto somebody if we fight them in a minion wave. Physical damage, Sunfire, any sort of magic damage opponent, then we want to go Hollow Radiance. Our other damage-oriented tank-ish item, Titanic Hydra, has sadly been removed from the tank cast. This item got poached by bruisers a long time ago, and unfortunately that is the direction that Riot chose to take it. The bonus HP to AD ratio has been completely pulled off this item, and instead the active has been reverted back onto it. This active will deal damage based on your max health, but it's going to be substantially less damage over a rotation than the old version of this item. In its current state, I would not recommend building Titanic Hydra on tanks. This is not an item for you. Instead, you got to use one of the new shiny toys. There are two really cheap tank items that are meant to tide you over if you're not an Iceborne Gauntlet user. Essentially, what we want to be doing as most champions is we build our first item for lane, then we build our next item for the next most common damage type, and then we build our Jack Show. The two options that we have in this slot are going to be Abyssal Mask and Frozen Heart. For all intents and purposes, Abyssal Mask is the exact same on the PvE as it is on live. It gives you 300 health, 60 magic resist, and then 10 ability haste. The passive is still the exact same. Unmake reduces nearby enemy champions' magic resist for each enemy affected gain magic resist, which is what it is on live. This item is really cheap at a total cost of 2400 gold, making it a great tide me over item, which can then be sold in the ultra late game for something more impactful. Frozen Heart is in a similar vein as Abyssal Mask. This item is only 2300 gold, it grants us 70 armor, 400 mana, and 200 ability haste. It has the same passive as it does on live, Winter's Caress, reduce the attack speed of nearby enemies by 20%, and then also the rock solid passive that it also has on live. This item will be quite strong in Season 14 simply due to the frequency that we're going to be seeing on hit champions. Blade of the Ruin King and Terminus are going to be absolutely broken, and the rock solid passive paired with the attack speed slow is a decent way to counter this if we're unable to CC our opponent immediately. While being super cheap, these two items will have their place. We're just going to have to build them situationally from game to game. Sometimes it will be unnecessary for us to build a Frozen Heart or an Abyssal Mask. We can buy a more luxury focused item, such as something like Force of Nature, Unending Despair, and the like. Speaking of Force of Nature, this item has also been grossly buffed to proportions that we haven't really seen before. Kainic Rookrun and Hollow Radiance are really gross. They're so gross that they outshine probably one of the strongest MR items that has ever been introduced into the game. Force of Nature now grants you 400 HP, 55 armor, and then 5% bonus movement speed. The Steadfast passive, however, is obnoxious in what it does. taking magic damage from enemy champions grants a stack up to 8, while at 8 stacks gains 17 magic resist and 10% increased movement speed. This single item grants you 125 magic resist when fully stacked. If you're an AD carry and you're getting blown up by a solo mage, you can simply just buy a Force of Nature if you aren't already abusing the overpowered Wit's End, and then you'll be insanely tanky against any sort of magic damage present in the game, as long as it does not kill you absolutely instantly. I honestly feel really bad for the mage players because this new MR itemization is going to be so grossly overpowered on bruisers and tanks alike, while also being able to be poached by AD carries who also have one of the strongest magic resist items that we've ever seen in the new Wit's End. Terminus is also another magic resist item, making mages have a really terrible time. Riot really hates mages with this item rework, which is hilarious because mages were supposed to get buffed and have more impactful influential items. They're supposed to be more fun to play, but it's going to be nearly impossible to have fun when you're playing against these overpowered stat stick items. Force of Nature granting 125 MR is straight up comical. When I saw these values, I thought it was a bug, but here we are at the end of the PvE cycle with only days until the new season begins, and it still remains just the same. I don't know what Riot's cooking, to be quite honest, but the second that on-hit items are nerfed, tank items are surely going to be the second ones to be hit, primarily the magic resist ones, as the passive effects are just way too strong. But yeah, this is pretty interesting to say the least. Anyways, this was Unsung with GameLeap. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. I'll see you guys in the next video.